Hey, Sopranos fans! Welcome to another Machiavellian Monday here on Sopranos Street, and we are here today to take a look at Phil Leotardo. Now, Phil Leotardo is fierce in reputation, stern in negotiations, and you do not want to have dinner with him if he's mad at you.
I jacked off at Manicotti.
But does that necessarily mean that he was Machiavellian? For those viewers who are new to this series, Machiavellianism is much more specific than a ruthless pursuit of one's own goals and some general notion that the ends justify the means. It's essentially a how-to-rule manual for current or aspiring leaders, detailing the most effective ways to deal with specific circumstances and different types of people based on Machiavelli's historical observations. So, how Machiavellian was Phil Leotardo? In evaluating this, we will take a look not only at his demeanor, but also at his time as a right-hand man compared to how Machiavelli said a number two should act, as well as his time as a boss, especially his second go-around, where things get really interesting with Doc Santoro as a comparison. Before that, please take a moment to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and we will get this show on the road. As always, we will need to take a second to address his level of boldness before moving on to the more specific criteria, for Machiavelli expressed that, with a few exceptions, good fortune is a woman, a lover of men with the audacity to command her, and Phil Leotardo was an exceptionally bold character. It's a trait that he demonstrates consistently through his part in the series, and it's a trait that we get a glimpse of very quickly during his early dispute with Tony, addressing him in a manner that you really shouldn't address a boss.
You got some balls, kid. I'll give you that much.
I've got huge cojones. Why do you think I wear these baggy shorts?
Don doesn't wear shorts.
We also see another Machiavellian principle, possibly related to boldness, start to show itself in Phil during this interaction, which is that a prince is more respected when he is either a true friend or an outright enemy, and Phil, like Tony, makes it very clear where people stand with him, perhaps to an extent that proves detrimental. With those general observations out of the way, we can begin to evaluate him more specifically, and we will start by comparing his behavior as a number two with how Machiavelli said a number two should act. For the most part, Phil acted as a decent number two under Johnny Sack and was used very effectively in that capacity. The prince states that a leader should install a stern governor when trying to control an unruly area, which Phil was, and they were. This is seen almost immediately after Carmine Sr.'s death with Lorraine Caluso. After the death of his brother, however, we begin to see fairly un-Machiavellian behavior take place. According to the prince, he who ignores what is done for what should be done sooner affects his ruin than his preservation, and despite his showing overwhelming concern with following the rules, like when it came to giving Carmela the full amount, he very boldly violates them when he goes after Christopher's mother. Family is off limits. You don't go after people's families, and Phil did. That's not to say he should have done it, but it does go to show that when it comes to following the rules, sometimes he will, sometimes he won't, and that's a trend we'll see throughout the series. But even still, for the most part, he remained a fairly Machiavellian number two. He was willing to join his fortunes with Johnny Sack's, and is clearly willing to put Johnny's interest above his own, as shown in regards to his brother's death.
So day to day, how you getting along with Tony?
You asked me to bury the hatchet, John. I'm doing it out of respect to you. Am I still grieving over my brother Bill? That'll never go away.
I appreciate it, Phil.
The fact that he's willing to move past his brother's death becomes funny, in that it goes to show a Machiavellian principle later on when Phil has Doc taken out, but we'll get to that in a bit. It's when Johnny Sack cries at his daughter's wedding that Phil really begins to lose respect for and start to separate from Johnny. After that, the wheels were set in motion as Phil begins leaving Johnny out of deals, and once John pleads guilty, we can start to evaluate Phil as a boss. Now, shortly after becoming boss, Vito, a member of Tony's crew, returned home after being outed, and it's with Vito that we see Phil going both ways in regards to the rules again. Since Vito was a member of Tony's crew, Tony should have been the one to handle it, but Phil did instead. Not surprisingly, this breaking of the rule kicks off a fight between New York and New Jersey, and when Butch proposes a possible solution, Phil decides to switch back to following the rules again.
As far as I'm concerned, this is like 9/11. Tony wanted our attention? Fine. He got our attention. Now we wipe him off the planet.
You're right. But whack a boss? I won't do that.
It's been done before.
And it was wrong then.
This never comes to fruition as Phil steps back due to health problems for the time being. It's during Phil's second stint as boss that we can really begin to evaluate him. But before we get into that, I want to take a second to circle back around to how he was able to move past the death of his brother under Johnny Sack. According to Machiavelli, a man will forget the death of his father before the theft of his property. Of course, Billy was his brother, not his dad, and there were other factors at play. But isn't it funny that he was willing to move past Billy's death, but this whole thing kicked off after Doc took his food? You can kill his brother, but if you take food off his plate, there's hell to pay. Anyways, many Machiavellian principles can be seen in the takedown of Doc Santoro, but unfortunately for Phil, he didn't seem to learn many of them. Machiavelli states that a prince should have two fears, trouble from the outside and trouble from within. Trouble from the outside, which in this case would be New Jersey, is easily beaten with superior arms, which New York had. From within, the trouble you fear is conspiracies. The thing about conspiracies is that they rely on pleasing the people, and Doc Santoro was hated, which, according to Machiavelli, is the worst thing a leader could be. In addition to that, he also states that taking an area with long-standing aristocracies, which would be similar to a New York family, is easier because it only takes one disgruntled noble to get the ball rolling. This is a concept Doc didn't get, and that Phil should have learned. It's also why Machiavelli specifically expresses not to drive nobles to desperation, but we'll get back to that. Once he's in as boss for the second time, we can really see Phil straying from the Machiavellian path. Rather than doing what is done and focusing on the money, he allows his personal feelings to interfere with the asbestos negotiations.
You and your friend there, Stefano, have been pocketing how much on this Cowboys and Indians asbestos removal?
Billing the townships like you're following all the EPA regulations.
You got the same scam, Phil, so why don't we cut through the bullshit? How much you figure you owed on this?
I need about $350.
Tony is understandably upset and turns it down.
I ain't giving you no $350, you goddamn Loch Ness monster! Get your own goddamn money!
But Phil remains firm when handling negotiations, which is very Machiavellian. The prince states that a prince should show in his private dealings that his word is irrevocable.
I thought about your offer. What do you say to 15%, plus we forget about the balance, what you owe me on the vitamin truck? First off, it wasn't an offer. It's my position.
But unfortunately for Phil, the tensions didn't stop there, and after a few more incidents, war was upon them. Since he intended to continue doing business with New Jersey, Phil did the Machiavellian thing and acted swiftly, as injuries inflicted all at once offend less and are gotten over more quickly. It also complies with the Machiavellian strategy that New York had unquestionably superior arms, so fast was the way to go. But Phil didn't learn any lessons from Doc regarding internal threats. Doc's problem was that he had disgruntled nobles, and Phil had support, which enabled the conspiracy to go down without anyone fearing a backlash. But here's the thing. Machiavelli states that you will lose friends when conquering if you do not treat them well, and Phil wasn't. Phil had disgruntled nobles, and worse, he drove one of them to desperation.
It's not that there's no work, it's that there's no progress.
Nobody's taking this lightly, Phil.
He should have been done first.
I know you're disappointed, Phil. I can hear it in everything you say.
Fucking A, I'm disappointed.
I don't know. Maybe...
What? You talking about reaching out? We can't go back. Are you out of your fucking mind? Listen, kid. When this is over, we're gonna sit down.
Butch knew he was in trouble and that he had to do something. It also goes to show Phil's lack of awareness that he would put Butch, of all people, in that position. He knows Butch can take out a boss. Butch did it for him, and not surprisingly, Butch was willing to have it done to him. Ultimately, Phil Leotardo proves to be only semi-Machiavellian, and mostly so only as a number 2. He provided the stern presence required of the position, but tried to carry that mentality into the position of boss, and paid the price for it. Perhaps he should have spent more of his time in jail reading The Prince, and less time compromising. Thanks for watching this episode here on Sopranos Street. If there's any character that you would like to see evaluated, let me know down in the comments. Also, to all the Wire fans that have posted in the comments, I am in the middle of a rewatch to freshen up, and I'm almost done with Season 3. The first Wire Machiavellian Monday will be Stringer Bell, but before that I will be releasing a video about Frank Sabata and one character comparison. I'm deciding between Chris Moltisanti and D'Angelo Barksdale, or Jackie Jr. and Ziggy. If there is one which you think would be better, please let me know. Anyways, thanks again for watching. Like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you at the next score.